Hello and welcome back to freephotoshop.com. In the previous video we worked on this image that I now have on screen called Grand Canyon North Rim. Now I wanted to show you something before we started fresh, so I undid the previous modification and then reapplied it by opening up levels and repeating the same values as we entered before. Now I'm going to switch back to the composite view, and you'll remember that we spoke about clipping some of the shadows in the image. Well, I just wanted to show you the histogram so you can see firsthand the clipped shadows. I'll try and illustrate this by highlighting the very first column here in the histogram. We've got this nice flattening out of the brightness values just here, and then all of a sudden we get this one brightness level which just happens to be black coming up a fair way into the graph. Now, like I said before, you're going to want to avoid clipping the shadows or highlights wherever you can, but here in this example, if I hold down the Alt or Option key and then click and hold on the composite shadow slider, we'll be able to see where the clipping is occurring inside the image. And here we see that the shadows are being clipped in the bottom left of this photograph, as represented by the yellow pixels, illustrating that we're actually clipping colours inside the blue channel. And that's because when we're investigating shadows, the colours that we see by Alt or Option dragging are actually the complementary colours of the clipped channels. Sounds confusing, but it'll all fall into place a little later on. And once again, you don't have to remember colours as they work inside the RGB colour space, because we can always double check what we think is right by switching to the blue channel and then left clicking the Shadows tab with the Alt or Option key down to reveal the clipped shadows right here in the blue channel. And there they are, just as we suspected. Now you'll see that if I untick the preview checkbox, then we never really had any details there in the first place. So the best I'm going to be able to do is to lighten up the area to a darker grey rather than the black that we have there at the moment. And by doing something as simple as that, we're going to take away the clipping and add just a tiny bit more detail to the area, which sometimes can make all the difference when you're dealing with photography. I'm going to turn the preview box back on just so I can see the results of any modifications we make here, and let's have a look at a few ways that we can work. Now, seeing as we're already in the blue channel, we could simply reduce the shadow value from 59 brightness levels to say around about 39 brightness levels. Then I'll switch back to the composite view, and we've done a great job of pulling back those clipped shadows. Trouble is, of course, we're now sacrificing the 95% of the image that already looked good by making it too blue just to make this little corner down here look better. There's no doubt about it, but this is the wrong way to work, and it also reiterates what I was saying about clipping, always in small doses, being a necessary evil occasionally. I'm going to reset the shadows in the blue channel to 59 once again. Now, we could spend all day sitting here moving sliders around, changing the input and output values in each channel, but bearing in mind that we didn't have any details to work with in the first place, we're probably best leaving this image as is. The reason for that is we can only modify 3 regions of the image: the shadows, the midtones and the highlights. So if we make any significant changes to the shadows, for example, and let's face it, to bring this little area down here to where we actually want it, we're going to need to be pretty brutal with some of the changes we make. Then we're going to be affecting a whole range of brightness levels inside the image that will range right into the midtones. And of course, we have the majority of shadow details and practically all of the midtones exactly where we want them already. And as we say here in England, we'd be cutting our nose off to spite our face should we go ahead with that kind of modification. So with that in mind, I'm going to hit the OK button, and one obvious thing I could do here is to grab the crop tool, either by selecting it from the tools palette or by hitting C on the keyboard, and then just cropping away the area of the image we no longer want. And once you're happy with the area that you've selected for cropping, you can hit the Enter key or Return key on the Mac to make those changes. I'm not going to go that way, however, so I'm going to hit Control or Command Z to undo that cropping. How about painting a small amount of lightness onto the shadow and lightening it up that way? Well, we can do that very easily by dodging the shadows in this area. I'm going to come over here to the Tools palette and select the Dodge tool, Then I'm going to choose a brush that fits the area quite nicely, like so. And I'm changing the size of the brush, by the way, by using the bracket keys on the keyboard. I'm also making sure that I've got a soft brush selected by using the bracket keys whilst holding down the shift key. Then you'll want to make sure that you have the range set to shadows and the exposure set to something like 10%. You don't want a terribly high value there, because the higher the value, the more harsh the changes we're going to make. A nice low value, as I said, usually does the best job. Now, in order to get an idea of what changes I'm making, I'm going to open up and then drag out the histogram so we can see it on screen over here. And notice that we're looking at exactly the same histogram as we were seeing inside levels, because the image hasn't changed since we finished our work inside levels, although I've got to say it's just about to. Now I'm going to very briefly paint over the extreme shadows over here at the bottom left hand side of the image. Just a couple of dabs with the dodge tool should do great. And I'm also going to dodge this dark rock face at the bottom here, and just look at the difference we've made inside the histogram. We've still got some clipped shadows, but we've greatly reduced them by using the dodge tool. Now I'm also going to show you one other painless way to remove that dark void at the bottom left of the image here, and this method is more of a creative approach, perhaps the best way if you're asking me, certainly for this image at least. I'm going to go ahead and move the histogram off screen, and then I'm going to look over here to the layers palette to where I've created this clone layer. I'm going to go ahead and turn it on, and you'll see that all I've done is cloned some of this shrubbery, some of this greenery from this area here, or roughly this area here, and placed it on top of that big bad shadow that really wasn't serving any purpose to the photograph at all. It wasn't adding any depth to the image, so my thinking is, well, let's just go ahead and clone over it, which is what I've gone ahead and done. The only trouble is this cloned layer has a blue cast associated with it, and that's because I created the clone before I applied the levels adjustment to the background layer. In order to make this level fit in naturally with the background layer, we're going to need to apply exactly the same levels adjustments. So I'm going to hit Ctrl or Command L to open up levels, and by the way, make sure that you have the cloned layer active in the layers palette. And we have these load and save buttons over here. Now thankfully I've gone ahead and saved the settings associated with the other layer, so I can simply click the load button and then load up the values that I'd entered previously. Now if I hadn't done this and I'd not made a note of the values, then there'd be absolutely no way of getting these values back, unless of course we're working with adjustment layers, which we will be later on. But for now, just remember that any changes we make inside the levels command are permanent, pixel altering changes that we can't modify once we've applied them. Okay, I've loaded up the previous levels values onto this cloned layer, and just so we can see the difference we've made, I'm going to click OK to lose the levels dialog box and see the cloned shrubbery fitting in perfectly with the main photograph. In fact, I'd go as far to say that if you weren't aware of the illusion I've just created, then you'd actually believe that there never has been a black hole in this beautiful photograph of the Grand Canyon. Okay, well I think we're there. We've made this image look great and proved at the same time that it doesn't have to be done in totality with the levels command. We have also used an array of other adjustment, correction and painting tools that are available here inside Photoshop. We could also have used the curves command, which would have given us a more specific control over the tonal range inside the image. Or maybe we could have turned to the awesome shadow highlight controls to claw in some of those shadows. As it is, we've made an adjustment to this photograph that we can all be proud of. In the next video we're going to get around to those ultra helpful keyboard shortcuts that I mentioned in the previous tutorial. Until then, thanks for joining me here at freephotoshop.com. I'll see you in the next video.